Hello and welcome to the CSIDC Virtual Field Day. My name is Gursahib Singh and I'm the current Research Director of Irrigation Crop Diversification Corporation. Behind the camera, we have our Research Associate, Ted Nodge. So we are standing on the Agri-Food Canada land. It's the Kanapik site. So for this field day, we are highlighting one of the barley study we are doing this year. This year we have multiple barley studies which are funded by Sask Barley. We have steps. We are looking at different fertilizer rates, different fungicide application timing to control diseases in barley, and then we are also playing around with PGRs, the plant growth regulators. And this study, this study I thought it would be interesting to highlight for this field is it's a potassium study, and the reason I'm talking about potassium, or I thought it's interesting, it's called, we don't have potassium is not limited in our soils, but still I thought it would be interesting to show this or highlight this for this field day. For this study, we are going into the second year of this study. So it's funded through ADOPT and Sask Barley. So it's a study we are looking into potassium application in both wheat and barley. The treatments for this study, so it's a 4-hour study. There are multiple 4-hour studies for nitrogen and phosphorus. So there have been few 4-hour studies for potassium, but nothing recent. So we thought let's do a 4-hour study on potassium and look for the response in wheat and barley. So by the 4-hour study, I means right source, right rate, right source, right time, and right placement. So for this study, the treatments we have, or the treatment list we included in this study is we have 8 treatments, including the control. We didn't apply any potassium. Then we had a seed placed potassium and side banded. For the seed placed and side banded, we had 3 treatments. We started with 10 kg of potassium per hectare. Went with second was 20 kg of potassium per hectare. Third was 30 kg of potassium. So seed placed and side band. That's 6 treatments. And for the 7th treatment, we went with both side band and seed placement. 20 kg of potassium per hectare for side band, and 40 kg of potassium for seed, 20 kg for seed place and 40 for side band. So this is the second year of this study, and we saw some interesting results last year. Before I start digging into results, I just want to highlight what all roles potassium has. Potassium plays within the plant growth, or which help the plant. So there's been anecdotal research or anecdotal claims by a few of the farmers that potassium helps. It prevents lodging. So one of the reasons we went ahead with this study, or the objective was to look at the different potassium application and look whether it improves lodging. Because potassium, it regulates the cellular formation within the cells. That means if there's a good intake, good uptake of potassium within the plants, the internodes, they would be thicker in diameter. Ultimately, it would prevent lodging. Second role of potassium within the plant is it also affects the quality of the barley, especially barley, not so much in wheat. For the barley, it can improve the plumpness of the barley, which is one of the quality which is required for the malt barley. The better the plumpness, the more or the better you get the malt quality. And the other potassium, the interplant cellular thing that potassium regulates within the plant, is that it also regulates the water uptake or water evaporation or transpiration from the cells of the plant. So potassium, it is one of the ions which is part of the guard cells of the stomata. So stomatas, those are the openings which are throughout the leaves on the leaf surface, and opening and closing of stomata is usually regulated by the guard cells. So stomata, it helps in breathing, helps in evapotranspiration. So potassium plays an important role in regulating the opening and closing of the stomata. So getting back to the results, so this study we went ahead last year. Last year was the first year, and we had 6 agriam sites participating on this study. Out of the 6 agriam sites, ICDC was the only site where we saw a response of potassium in barley. Out of the 6 sites, including ICDC, there wasn't response of potassium on wheat. So for barley, for barley response at ICDC site, what we found was the control as compared to the treatments, like there's no potassium to all the other 7 treatments. There was if we average all the treatments, there was a yield response of 17% as compared to the control. So we did saw some yield benefits. Our last year, 2021, we all know it was a drought. Water was limiting. There wasn't much moisture available for the crop. So lodging, it wasn't. I wasn't expecting lodging last year with those limiting factors, and with that heat, the crop never grew, or didn't like that heat, and it never grew that tall. So we didn't saw any lodging. We looked at the quality parameters like plumpness, proteins. Our plumpness, most of the treatments, they were better as compared to the control. Same as protein, the control and the treatment the control had slightly higher protein as compared to the treatments, but there wasn't a big difference. The results, they were not significantly different from each other. So this year, this is the second year, and again we have 6 agriam sites participating on this study. If we look around, Ted, if you can go around on the plots, we have the wheat plots here, and up on the corner we have the barley plots. We are not seeing any visual difference between the treatments. It was the same last year. There wasn't any visual difference, but ultimately when we harvested, we saw a yield difference of 17%, which is hard to miss visually in the plots. But for the results for this year, we had the same weather conditions in July, later part of June and July, as compared to as similar to 2021. We didn't receive much rainfall. The irrigation, the only water source was irrigation at our site. Just if I have to guess for the results for 2021, I think we would see the similar response in barley, but I'm not guessing that for wheat. And other thing I want to mention that there's been a previous research on barley with both in wheat and barley. Gary, who was the research director at ICDC, he was part of that research, and he found that response for potassium in wheat could be found every 5 years, but for barley it could be every 2 years. So I'm just hoping we would see the similar results, but I'm not pressing or promising anything for the response in barley. Apart from that, the plots look good. There's no height difference. There's no lodging. Again, we didn't have much rainfall. It was just the precipitation, it was just the irrigation which helped the plots to keep them wet. And once we have the results, we will compile the report and put it up at the ICDC website, and we will also try to highlight the results at the coming extension events. Thank you. Welcome back. We have the results for the potassium study we had on ICDC. As I mentioned, this study was funded by ADOPT, Ministry of Agriculture, and it was a multi-site study. We had six sites participating last year, and this year we had 4 sites participating this year. So in total, we had 10 site years of data. But for this video, I would be just presenting the results for the ICDC site. But if you need more information on how other sites how was the response on other side for the potassium fertilizer. The final report was submitted to Ministry of Agriculture. It should be up on their website, and also the results would also be posted on the ICDC website under the R&D report. So the R&D report, it should be public. It's not up on the website, but it should be public in the coming few months. So for this study, as I mentioned earlier, it was a 4-hour study for potassium fertilizer. The fertilizer we used was KCl. For the malt barley, we had a variety AAC Synergy. For spring wheat, we had AAC Wheatland. So in this, we were comparing different rates of potassium fertilizer and their placement. The rates were 10, 0 was the control where no potassium was applied. And then we had the rates at 10, 20, 30. And then we had a treatment where we applied 60, actual 60 of potassium fertilizer. And for the placement, we had seed placed fertilizer comparing to the sideband fertilizer. And the last treatment where we applied 60 kg per hectare of the potassium fertilizer, 20 was seed placed and 40 was sidebands. Other thing, as I mentioned in the video, was potassium. It helps or it prevents plant lodging. So for this trial, we went ahead and we applied higher than more nitrogen fertilizer than we would usually apply, just to create a scenario or create an environment which is conducive for lodging, and just to see if the potassium fertilizer is helping with the lodging as well. So in this case, we applied nitrogen fertilizer at 1.25x rate. So just to give you a background on what the potassium levels at ICDC. So in both years, the potassium levels, they were in medium to high range. Up on the screen, you have the soil test results from 2021. The potassium level was 190 ppm. If you multiply that by 2, that would be approximately pounds per acre. So that would be 380 pounds per acre. And for 2022, it was 161 ppm, and if you multiply that by 2, it would be 320 pounds per acre. So we had a good reserve of potassium in both years. And coming to the results, what we saw was for the yield results for 2021, we saw a potassium response in barley, but we didn't respond to the potassium fertilizer in the first year. So the barley plots where potassium was applied, it yielded higher. The average yield for all the treatments where potassium was applied was 102 bushels per acre. And to the treatment where no potassium fertilizer was applied, it yielded around 88 bushels per acre. So up on the bar graph for 2021, the orange or the red bar graphs are for the barley, and the blue are for the wheat. For the wheat, as I said, there was no response, and you can see all the bar graphs there. They're approximately of the same height, so there wasn't any significant difference between the treatments. For the second year, last summer, what we saw was there was a response in both wheat and barley. So we were lucky enough, so we had the response in wheat as well. So if you compare the control where no potassium fertilizer was applied, and you average the yield of all the treatments in both wheat and barley, for the control, the yield was 72 bushels per acre, but for all the treatments where potassium was applied, it was 81 bushels per acre. So there's a difference of 9 bushels per acre. For the barley, again, we saw a response in the second year as well. So the first year, what we saw was the base rate, or the rate of 10 kg per hectare of potassium had the highest yield response, and with another increment of 10 going to 20 kg per hectare,
to 30 kg per hectare of potassium fertilizer, there wasn't a big response. In the second year, what we saw was as the rate increased, the yield also increases. And the highest yield we saw was in the plots where we applied the highest amount of potassium fertilizer. So the treatment, which had 20 kg per hectare of potassium fertilizer seed placed and 40 side banded, ended up with a higher yield for barley, whereas for wheat, again, potassium applied treatments, they were better than the control, but seed placement and rates did impacted the yield as much. Coming to the conclusions for this study, what we saw was both wheat and barley showed yield responses. Barley in both years and wheat in just 1 year. Seed placement and sideband, they were equally affected. There wasn't a big difference or big increase in yield. And also for this study, as it was mentioned in the title, that we were also planning to look if the potassium fertilizer, they improved the quality of the malt barley. But in the 2 year of our study, we didn't find any response or the quality response, which is actually the thin and the plum kernel for malting barley. We didn't saw any difference between the treatments. So this was the conclusions or the results for this second year of this study. As I mentioned, the results are already submitted to Ministry of Agriculture. A combined site report is also already submitted, and a combined site report for 2022 would also be posted on the ICDC website as well. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to the ICDC employees. We will be happy to assist you with your questions. Thank you.